In my last video on post-game depression, I said something along the lines of, I might never experience this feeling ever again. And only 1 month later, I'm more than happy to say that I was wrong. We found it, boys. We found peak. Unreal Life, and before I say any more, do yourself a favor, click off this video and go play it. It's practically free on Steam. I'll try and keep this video as spoiler free as possible though, but even then, trust me, going in blind is your best bet. Alright, it's not often that I recommend a game at the very beginning of a video without even trying to sell you on the game beforehand. This game is just that, one of the very few games that I could recommend to anyone and everyone regardless of their own personal tastes. Anywhere between someone who speedruns Elden Ring in their sleep and someone who has never touched the game in their life. If you're anywhere on the spectrum, then this game's for you, as it's got a little something for everyone. This is one of those games that are just universally good, and how much you enjoy them is heavily influenced by your own perspective going into this masterpiece. Before I give my own perspective on this game, allow me to give you some context. At its core, Unreal Life is a very simple story that considers the medium it's being told through. A lot of heavy lifting is done through the game's presentation. As I also mentioned in my last video, art style is everything, and Unreal Life hits the nail right on the head with this one, as the art style is not only gorgeous, but it also portrays many aspects about the story through its visuals, foreshadowing, setting, emotion. Unlike most other games, Unreal Life does not hide things from you or lead you into narrative traps. It's extremely honest in its storytelling, as the keys to solving this mystery are all right there in front of you right from the get-go. And that to me is such a breath of fresh air, as most games seem to shy away from this honest style of storytelling, as they are afraid of giving away too much, or another way of thinking about it, making the overall narrative seem less complex, which is a very artificial way of telling a story. But just because the entire plot is right in front of you, that doesn't necessarily take away from the overall mystery about the world. You still gotta put all the pieces together in order to get the full picture. The more lore you uncover, the more questions pop up, which allows the game to maintain its mysterious vibe. The nice thing about this game is, as I've mentioned before, everyone would enjoy this game, but the degree to how much you enjoy it greatly depends on your own perspective. For example, my own perspective going into this was, this is a mysterious world and the truth is worth uncovering. Keeping in mind that the entire game is about 6 hours long, and from the first hour I pretty much uncovered most of the major plot points before they even happened. I'll be honest, I was quite thrown off at first by how honest everything on screen was. Nothing in this game is trying to deceive you, but since I'm so conditioned that every story is actively trying to deceive me in order to have more of a perceived mystery feel, that I didn't recognize how in plain sight major plot points were. There are about 4 endings in this game, and all of them stand on their own 2 feet as decisive endings. It's done, the story's over, with the exception of one of the endings, which I'll come back to in a bit. Another player might have the perspective of not wanting to uncover the truth themselves, but rather have the game tell them everything, which it does. About 80% of the game is eventually explained, which is a majority of the major plot points within the narrative. A third player could heavily relate or sympathize with the characters and or events that take place. 5 different people with varying perspectives, personal experiences, and biases could all come out of this game with vastly different experiences. This is no small feat, and I wish more games would follow this example. Now allow me to talk a little bit about the presentation. One word: immaculate. Gameplay, art style, music, all intertwined together in such harmony in order to tell a story. The simplistic art style that intensifies and relaxes based on the events unfolding. How each piece of music fits perfectly into each scene. The reasons behind the subtle and cliched characters. The almost melancholic gameplay that completely takes your mind off the fact that you're actually playing a video game. The world is not ashamed of its design or imperfections. It allows you to almost go anywhere and everywhere in order to best take in the world for yourself. You only realize how simplistic the gameplay was after you beat the game and go right back to play it again, due to how engrossed you were with the game the whole time. Right, left, and the mouse, those are your controls. Dummy simple, but it just works. There are only minor changes to gameplay throughout the game that keep it from going stale, but overall, the gameplay was left intentionally simplistic in order not to detract from the main focus of the game, which allows the player to kinda take their mind off the gameplay and get to absorbing the world around them. There are these little moments that are scattered throughout the game. They suddenly pop up out of nowhere. They just hit unbelievably hard. I never in my life thought that seeing a little girl hug a traffic light would be this happy and wholesome, and yet, here we are. Due to the nature of the story, which I'm not about to give away, it allows for many different ways to show and tell different aspects about the world, the characters, and the plot. It allows for many gateways to convey the same thing in just different ways, which in a way could seem kinda redundant and overdone, but once you take a closer look, you realize that the more intertwined into itself the story is, the easier it becomes for the game's general perceived feel to always consistently remain at its peak. All that I've just said probably made absolutely no sense. In that case, why are you still here? Go play the game and understand for yourself. Now, onto the segment of the video that I really didn't want to make. There's something about this game that I just cannot stand. Many other narratives seem to fall into this very trap when it's so incredibly easy to avoid. I'm gonna be making up my own terms as I go here, since I don't really know what the issue with these narratives is called, if it even exists. Scope is one of the main things to consider when writing a story. What scope here means is how much the narrative sticks to its own themes, genres, messages, settings, etc, etc. In my opinion, one of the greatest signs of a solid narrative is its ability to teeter on themes outside of its own scope while still remaining true to its own themes while not overstepping the boundaries it forces onto itself in order to become more believable. The best stories are grounded in reality is a line I ripped straight from the game itself. So sending your story to space, as in changing the setting to a space setting, introducing things like time travel or multiverse theory are some of the easiest ways to unground your story and step outside the narrative scope when it was never in scope to begin with. And unfortunately, this game is guilty of just that, which later leads you to one of the endings I mentioned earlier in the video. At least it's better than most games that do this, as 1, you gotta beat the game first, and 2, this lore is so incredibly well hidden that it's borderline impossible for a player to uncover without using a guide or a walkthrough. And as for me, I'm just trying to wipe that shit out of my memory and pretend it never existed. Man, this must be how Sneeko felt. Anywho, the game is still top tier nonetheless. But who am I kidding? You're probably still gonna be playing your garbage despite all my efforts.